is what I've been doing it for.
You're
So
right. And that's
yeah,
the time to enjoy the convertible is
yes.
at night when you
So,
don't have that sun beating on
yeah,
you.
so
Yeah.
nice.
Nice. Well,
Awesome. I'm
we'll
here for
just
you.
jump right into it. So, Jacob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Such a pleasure to see you.
Thank you. The first thing I wanted to do is acknowledge you because I was working with you a few years ago as my business coach slash mentor. And it was like right when the pandemic hit, and obviously the world was a little crazy, and we're all going through what we're going through. And you were instrumental in emotionally and mentally getting me to a place of doing better. And a big part of that was a conversation that you and I had where it was like, well, Angie, what can you do that's creative? What do you like to do? And I just had nothing. I'm not creative at anything. I can't draw. I can't do this. I can't do that. Nothing. And then you said, well, okay, what do you like to do? And I'm like, well, I like to talk. And you're like, okay, why don't you look at starting a podcast? And it was that conversation that you sparked that light bulb, which was funny because I had told you about how, in the very beginning days, I used to go talk on the radio, even though I had no clue what I was doing. And it kind of came full circle for me. And I want to, like 100 episodes in now, I want to thank you for putting me back on that path and really reigniting that fire and passion that I had for this.
It is such an honor. I always say that the secret to being a good coach is just being able to find good clients. So that's really my only thing that I'm somewhat adept at, is finding people like you who can take suggestion and then really run with it. So it's a real testament to you, and it was a real honor to be a part of your journey. I thought candidly you were going to say that my best contribution was recommending that you join the Arte Syndicate, but I'll take the podcast also.
Oh, you're right. That was a close second. And what I've done with that, like you said, that's been huge for me too. Gosh darn it. Yes, you're right. That was a big one, and it's still a big one for me. Here I am. I just finished phase 1 for the second time, so doing that with Andy. I've got another summit that's scheduled for November, and I'm
Nashville. Is that the Nashville one?
Yep, going to
I was
Nashville,
thinking of that. Okay.
going to hang out with them, have dinner with them. I've gotten Emily on my podcast, so that's been huge and instrumental in many ways as well.
Awesome. Well,
Look at you. Look
yeah,
at you. So helpful in so many ways.
It's so funny. Because I think around the time that we were working together, I was launching a coaching training academy, and I see so many people come up with this fear of like, oh my God, how am I going to be these instruments of transformation? I'm like, you don't have to be, as long as you can sort of create space for exceptional people. Like that's all they need. And so you are a perfect representation of that. So thank you. You're great.
Awesome. Thank you. I think the one thing that sets people like me and you apart is just no fear of just doing it. I'd rather fail than and tried or than never trying. And so for me, those are the only regrets I live with. Is when I wanted to do something, I thought I should do something, but then I didn't do it. So for many, many years now, that's my operating basis. Is like, I might fail, but I'm going to try it, and we'll see how it goes. And 9 times out of 10, it's a good thing.
It's so funny. I think it was a quote off of, if you haven't read it yet, Tim Kennedy's book, which I forgot.
Scars and Stripes.
Scars and Stripes.
Scars and Stripes. Right? Yes,
yeah.
I mid it. Yeah.
So he has. I saw it was one of the quotes on the Ranger Up shirts back in like the very beginning when they were getting out, and the quote was, "But did you die?" And I was like, that is such an awesome way of looking at it, because I don't know. It could be that it's, I don't know if it's age or what, but I have this like reoccurring idea that, we get such a short time here, and it's like, why not? And the more I have the opportunity to speak to people that are kind of creating the life that most people fantasize about, it's the exact same thing. It's just like, I'm going to go for it, and I'm going to create a mindset that serves me to get me where I want, and I'm going to upgrade it, and I'm not going to look at my mindset as status quo. So I think that might be a shift that it sounds like, again, and some people can do it intuitively. It sounds like, I don't know, you might have not seen this part of the process, but and just kind of been able to do it. But what I've really seen for so many people is that successful people see that the mindset itself is the only thing that you really have to work on. Conditions will change. Conditions again, even this thing about failure. Like let's say I try something and it doesn't work, or I make an investment and it doesn't pan out. So that only works in a realm where there is win and loss. But if there's win or learn, and learning is also successful, so then you really create a reality for yourself that you can ensure is destined for success.
Absolutely. And I forget which inventor it was.
Thomas Edison,
Yeah. You know exactly where I'm going. I'm
1971.
so bad at this stuff. But, somebody said you've had so many failures, like hundreds of thousands of failures of innovations. He's like, yeah, but that just moves me closer to the ones that are going to be a success.
100%.
Yeah. And you got to have thick skin and be like, okay, well, that one, like we were talking about earlier, like the videos, it's like, oh, well, people didn't enjoy that. That content wasn't good. I put all my heart in this and it just wasn't well received. Like, okay. So keep putting it out, and then maybe you'll just put up a cute dog video and everybody loves it, and all of a sudden you're viral.
It's funny. There was I'm assuming you've heard it. I'm not sure, but all of your listeners should listen. There was a with the caveat. I always have to say this, and it's kind of funny. I work with a lot of like more, I guess you could say, traditional religious people. So I always like Wes Watson and Andy Frisella, both of them. I'm like, if you're okay with cursing, this is the greatest thing you'll ever listen to. But they did. I don't know. Did you hear the interview that they did together? It was
No,
like
I haven't heard that one yet.
you got to listen to it. And
Wow.
the thing that's so awesome that both of them basically say is like, I was in the shadow for 10 years before any of this stuff popped off. And that's also a perspective that, again, even for you or like for me or for a lot of the people we work with, it's like you have to realize that the people that really blew up, like it took them much longer than it takes people like us, just because you could call it technology or different opportunities, that you have to have that perception and that perspective on how long it takes. And yeah, there are overnight successes, but practically speaking, the overnight successes can disappear overnight, and the enduring brands are the ones that just had a longer runway.
I agree with you. And I think almost every successful person we see, especially around our age, is everyone thinks I'm an overnight success, but I've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah.
It just finally hit. And I think that's almost the problem. And maybe it's not a problem. It's just a difference with the younger generation is they see people, hit that viral video as a younger person and be like, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get a video and then I don't have to do all this work for all these years to get to that place. I'm just going to get lucky with, one of these things that I throw out there and be that overnight success.
It's funny. I was thinking like I was going to do like a jujitsu reference, but CrossFit will work the same. Where after in the beginning, like it's very hard. All of the form feels very unnatural. But then even if you're watching like at a high level, again, I'm a UFC fan, so when I watch UFC or when you're watching the CrossFit games, and you can break down and watch all of the micro movements because you understand what goes into doing those moves, and then it becomes a much more exciting game tool. Again, if you're watching fighting or people lifting heavy stuff and doing crazy stuff, it's exciting if you don't know what's going on. But if you're actually a practitioner of it and you know what's going on, then you're like, wow, that was super legit. And what I've found is that the only way that you get that is by taking all of the time to actually check off the boxes. And so like you were saying, like that inventor thing, like how did I know it was Thomas Edison? It's like, because I've sat in this stupid like self-development space. It's not stupid. I've sat in this for 2 decades. And like when I listen there, I'm going to reference either a bunch of books or a bunch of podcasts. Please forgive me. There was a brilliant interview. Kamaru Usman was the undefeated light heavyweight champion. No, he was middleweight champion of the UFC for a bunch of years. One of these people that were thought to be on track to be the greatest of all time. Could be he is. And then there was this fluke. The cool thing about fighting is like there was this fluke called, it wasn't a fluke because I practiced it before, but it was like everything worked out perfectly that this champion got kicked in the head and just went out immediately. And after that knockout, he went on Joe Rogan, and literally, if you listen to the interview, it is a masterclass on how a champion thinks and how a champion gets back up and analyzes what he did wrong and analyzes where things shifted. And it was just so cool. And if you don't have that background in self-development, you can hear it and be like, yeah, that was a cool interview. But if you have that background in working on yourself and like overcoming stuff, you can hear that and you're like, yeah, that is actually perfectly applied tactics and techniques that I'm doing myself. So it's very exciting for, again, one of my coaches, named John Madsen, has a book. I told you I'd do this. Has a book called "Chop Wood and Carry Water." It's literally. Um,
You need more bookshelves.
Joshua Medcalf. Chop Wood, Carry Water by Joshua Medcalf. And same concept. It's like that you have to love the process of getting great. And if you have that, the outcome is expected. And if you don't do that, even if you stumble on the outcome, in most cases, it doesn't turn out great.
It's so true. And it's funny, like as you're talking, I think about like, what do they call them? Monday morning quarterbacks. It's like,
Yeah.
you have all these people like dissecting what these professionals are doing wrong, but yet they have never played in professional sports. They have no idea what goes into it. They maybe played in high school, maybe, but it's like until you're actually doing it, you don't have an appreciation for it. And then that's where you get the haters, because anybody who's gone through the work, they realize what goes into you being at this place and they appreciate it. It's the people who have no idea that are the haters that are like, oh, you just suck.
Right. Which means that, and it's always I talk a lot about this because I have kind of an exciting opportunity that I get to coach a lot of like whatever you call them, like A players, so to speak. And then I also get to mentor and coach people that are going into that field. And it's so interesting when and most of the people that I work with from a learning how to coach are coming from a more traditional like nonprofit background or mental health background. They're usually like, highly like credentialed and educated and have no idea actually how to run a business or have a lot of mental fortitude. So we're really at the infant stages of building that for them. And it's so interesting because everyone talks to me about, I have imposter syndrome and I'm so nervous and how do I X, Y, and Z? And it's like, clearly, if you've ever spent time with really successful people, I would say 99.9% of them are incredibly humble, excited to help, looking to add value, not judging you. No one's looking at your car or your balance sheet or your wallet. Like, it just doesn't exist, because in order for you to get successful and to be successful, you have to pick up all those humility things. Again, there was just that clip of Prince Charles, like telling something, like moving things off of his desk. It's like, that's someone who's kind of like born with a spoon in his mouth, but most people will like actually just clean the desk themselves if they're actually at that level.
100%. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that imposter syndrome. And you recall I was part of an entrepreneur group locally, and I would go through that all the time because I didn't have the degrees, I didn't have the this, the that. I just didn't feel like I fit there, and I felt like I was an imposter, even though I had 100 employees and we were doing what we were doing. It just felt odd to me. And then I joined a different group of maybe more like-minded, and all of a sudden I felt totally comfortable. I felt totally confident. I no longer had that imposter syndrome. And it was just important for me to find the tribe, like you said, of very successful people that were like-minded as well, which I think is really important. So I think a lot of times if you're feeling like an imposter, you might not be in the right group or situation that's building you up in the best possible way.
So some of my clients I would be meeting over Zoom, and I believe for most of the times when we met, we were on the phone. And so I actively remember our conversations. For some reason, the way my mind works is I remember the circumstances around me. So I have one very clear, vivid memory. I was talking to you while I'm driving through the snow, and the other one I was standing by. There's this lake in central Minneapolis. There's about 1 billion lakes in Minneapolis, but I remember having a conversation with you about this exact thing where you were actually beating yourself up because of your, hopefully I can share it. I'm going to do it anyway, where you were beating yourself up on that exact piece before you joined that other group, where you were upset, this so-and-so person has created this amount of value. And I'm like, dude, you run an opportunity for people to refine their life. Like your first goal was impact, and your second goal was income. And this other guy ran, I don't know, like a more traditional, just how do I make money business? And it's like, you're literally trying to compare yourself in the wrong sport. I said, you got to find someone that runs a facility like yours or facilities like yours, and then see how you're doing compared to that. And then when you reanalyze it, you're like, oh, I guess actually we're the best at what we do. And so it's just that, it's like that you have to be incredibly intentional when again, it's not working. Like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what's not working, and what would working look like, and who is working, and how do you define that? And then, a lot of times people come back to this idea, and it's going to sound weird to someone that comes from practicing a monotheistic religion. People get really stuck on this idea of absolute truth. Like, but there is a bottom line benchmark of what success looks like. And it's like, No, there effing isn't. You can figure out and define it however you want. And it's so interesting, not to play on any kind of political ideas, but like in on one end of the spectrum, people are super good that you can create your identity however you want it to be. But then a lot of times we don't take that for ourselves and how that can serve us. And it's like, can I consider myself a success? Can I consider myself confident? Can I consider my business successful already, instead of like I suck because I haven't built what, insert whoever's better than you or done more than you has done. And it's just like being able to craft your own identity and figure out what lane you want to compete in, like that's the ingredient to be successful every single time.
I love that. And like, what you brought up and what I have to continuously sort of handle myself on, it's not the EBITDA. It's not like, look at your net profit and how good you're doing financially. I mean, that is obviously a sign of success, but there can be success that you need to look for in other ways. Like, how many lives have you saved? How many graduates did you get? How many staff do you employ? Like, what's the bigger picture, as opposed to just what's the financial bottom line that indicates how successful or not successful you are.
Well, I had this. I literally was having this same reflection yesterday with someone that was reflecting over his career and saying a similar thing, which was, well, I don't even know if I was successful. And again, like it's for you. It's like if you could help one person, move past their addiction. If you could help one person get healthy, which again is one family and one person's father and one person's kid and one person's brother, and then they have brothers and family, and like if you could do one, isn't your life enough? Like, haven't you done enough? Like, again, that whole, I don't know, there was a Private Ryan back in the day, right? He was telling the one guy that the whole team got killed to save. He's like, earn this. And it's like this idea that if we reflect on what we're actually doing, even if it's giving some, again, if you employ one person, right? It's like, isn't that a person could have a job, could come home, could feed their family, could, like, isn't that enough? And so this is the Dan Sullivan concept, but so many people get stuck in what he calls the gap, which is like what I haven't done or what's not looking the way I want, and not in the gain, which is reflecting back and looking at the things that you've actually done and recognizing, like, if that was it, like if your life ended right now, did you have a good run? And if you look at the things you've accomplished, most people could look at that. Again, I think you have to work on developing, not you, one would have to, if the answer is not yes, you have to work on gratitude. But in most people that have a normal sense of gratitude can look back at their life, if you remove the anxiety of the future, and be like, yeah, if I went out today, like it was an awesome ride. And that's I think the mentality, that's where Tony Robbins talks about that you can't be afraid and grateful at the same time, that having that gratitude that you were good or you helped that one person and you've helped, I don't know how many thousands of people, both in terms of giving them jobs and helping them, how do you say, like past the addiction, like through the
overcome addiction. Yeah.
Overcome the addiction. It's like you're like on cloud nine all day, and on top of it, you've made money and you've built a profitable facility. But it's like you're just like stacking wins at this certain point. And it's like, what the f do I have to be upset about? Again, we always can have reasons to be upset about, but again, that becomes a choice, because you could look at it that way, or you can choose to look at all this stuff that is working for you and just kind of live in that world.
Yes, I love that. And that's definitely what I've spent like the last couple of years doing, daily gratitude, affirmations, that sort of thing, but really like being appreciative and not that I wasn't before. Obviously I am. I love my team, my facility, my modality, everything about it. But when, you hit the imposter syndrome, or things are hard, or you have to navigate very challenging times, like a pandemic and healthcare in California, you can sort of start to feel frustrated or beat yourself up, or I should be doing better. I could be doing better, instead of saying, holy crap, look how good we're still doing considering all this other stuff, which is amazing. And again, it's acknowledging yourself. And just to like deviate just slightly, this is like, what I notice, and I love hearing at graduations with our clients, is, they learning how to self-acknowledge themselves and, say sorry to themselves, make amends to themselves, but then thank themselves. And that's something that a lot of people don't do. Their selves are at the bottom of the list of priorities. And it's so important to make yourself the priority.
Well, I think that's the big. If you think about the big message of consumerism and adding on tech and government and how it all like beautifully plays together, it's like we downplay the value of the individual. We downplay the value of ourselves, and I think that that's why at no matter even though there's more money than ever before and more a simpler life than ever before, like you guys stay busy and will always be busy, and it's an ongoing problem. Is because when the self gets lost, then again, like then addiction, however it shows up, be it substance or otherwise, like that's when that enters in, because we need those cope. And again, I don't want to say need is but again, we go to those coping mechanisms because the self is lost. And when you find even the smallest sense of self-determination, and you find even the smallest sense of, again, appreciation for yourself, or ownership, right, then you're able to really progress and to be able to choose you over whatever you're addicted to. Of
I love that. Well, and it applies to everybody, not just people overcoming
course.
addiction. Like I've noticed as I've been speaking on podcasts and stuff, like women my age who are going through I'm graduating my kids. I don't know what's left. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my next phase in life is. Um, it's good to sort of be an inspiration to them. It's like, okay, cool. Take all that time and pour it into yourself. Imagine if you made you number one after all these years of sacrificing. And I mean that in the best possible way. But what we do for our children is they're first, and they got to be first. We got to take care of them. We got to feed them. We got to make sure they're going to survive. And I think for so many of us becomes very much below that. And so it's an interesting process to kind of empower people to make themselves the most important thing, so that they are their best selves for everything else. Because I think there's a misconception like that's selfish, or you don't need to be spending all that time on making yourself look better, feel better. But it's like that's the best time you could spend to be your best version of yourself, to be better for everybody else.
I think that I just to again, not I'm in no way a clinician of any of this, but again, if we would use the idea of addiction as there was an amazing book I called Chasing the Scream. I forgot who wrote about it, but he was a Swedish author that really like framed the quote war on drugs and what actually motivates people to again every kind of different addiction. And he really said it's like in a lot of times it's feeling detached, it's not feeling good, it's not that anyone's actually looking for to use the drugs, but rather it's that we're looking to soothe, to calm, to cope with our life. And again, like you're seeing one like channel of the way that people do that. But I again, like the even within a family, and again, we want to be careful here, but for a lot of people, it's like are they giving for their kids, or are they giving because they don't know how to give to themselves? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're giving because you're giving to your kids, that's awesome and healthy and amazing. And again, but if you're giving because you're trying to, I don't know, live out the life that you didn't get to live, or seek validation from them because you can't find validation from a spouse or a job or something like that, which I don't know, like my own life was very much like a reflection of a lot of those themes. Like then it ceases to be about serving the kid, even if you are loving on and helping and creating all of the good opportunities. And ultimately it's like, how do I, the parent, escape from this kind of like dark hole that I'm in? And so again, the message I think is very, very relevant, not just for those people that can actively acknowledge and start to try to work on addictions, but just everyone in general that is out of place and out of touch and out of alignment with themselves.
Ah, it's almost like you're looking into my soul, Jacob, as you were saying that, because that's exactly. And again, I've been working on personal development for, gosh, it's been 28 years now, but it doesn't mean that you're not above any of this stuff. And that's exactly what happened to me with my son through his high school years. And I used to tell him, I'm just living vicariously through you, because I dropped out of high school. I mean, I ended up graduating, but I was not involved. I was already on my addiction path at that point. And so, yeah, I was at every game. I was at everything. He had this like rally and I was super into it, and it got canceled because of COVID. And I was so upset. And he's like, dude, what is wrong? You parents are more upset over this stuff than us kids are. His senior trip got canceled and we couldn't go to Disneyland. And he's like, honestly, Mom, you guys care way more about this stuff than we do. And I'm like, oh my God. So it's exactly like what you were saying. I was so much more invested in him and what he was doing to feel that sort of self-validation and whatnot that I was missing elsewhere, that I don't know how healthy it was. I mean, I'm glad I was there 100% and all in, but at the same time, I'm glad I pivoted as soon as he went off to college to sort of find that in myself because it was lost.
It's funny. I had that. It's an interesting experience. Again, like you're saying that a lot of times we put more emphasis on our past and our children's lives than we were able to do for ourselves because we have that awareness that we missed out, or even if it's that you missed out, but that you would have done things differently. And as you sort of get older, I had this crazy. I haven't made a lot. I think they got to have like a lot of friends, but like my core friends I met when I was like 18. Like I met my wife and I met my best friend. And what's crazy about like Gmail is like you can like literally put in like, you know, 05, 06, and you could look up all these old conversations. And it was like a horrifying realization that when I was 21, you know, again, I opted my life path was, you know, growing up kind of like just a normal American kid. And then I ended up going to a very, what you would call like, I don't know if you haven't seen it. There was actually some famous movies about it on Netflix, but like an ultra Orthodox environment in Jerusalem, which I was very grateful. It was like, again, was as culturally opposite as a person like joining the military or a person like, again, any, you can imagine, a complete cultural shift. And and I looked at that. And again, my goal was not, I wasn't getting an MBA. I was studying for the sake of studying. There was no, and you know, but it was interesting because the emails I was sending to my friends was like, you know, worrying so much about money and stressing out so much about the future. And it was like, I made it through there and the stressing didn't help me at all. And if I could go back, and that's the thing that I tell like people when they're going, again, you tell your kids, like, it's just like, enjoy the fact that you just enjoy where you are. And then you think to yourself now, and you're like, am I enjoying where I am right now? So it's interesting. And I see that same theme where when you have awareness of what you might have messed up on or wished you had done differently in your past, you either try to pressure other people to do that, or you try to revert back to that past and people like, you know, again, we all like shirk responsibilities, whatever it might be. Or you could say, hey, I'm going to eventually be looking back at today and I'm going to be thinking like, what the hell are you so stressed out about? Why don't you just enjoy it? And I think that's that same like recalibration. So again, for your listeners, you know, I think that I just candidly to say that you are such a profound and proud example of actually practicing what you preach and actually doing that work. Again, like you said, despite or in spite of the fact that you've built a successful business, you've helped thousands of people, and you've been doing this for decades.
Wow, thank you. I appreciate that. And many amazing people along the way like you who've helped me along because I certainly never could do this on my own. So you've been instrumental in a lot of where I'm at today, and I'm highly appreciative of that as well.
My
And
pleasure.
and like you said, it's a part of the journey. So, and I think that's where, you know, the daily affirmations and mindfulness comes in is like taking a look around, especially with what's gone on over the last few years, where you could easily go down a dark hole of doom and gloom of what's happening in the world and where we're going. And it's, you know, we're all going to die and, you know, who knows what it is. And where you can actually sit and reflect and go, yeah, but what's going right for me? And really taking the time and being appreciative of those things. And it kind of like a little snowball, it starts to grow, and then you start seeing it in everything you're looking at as opposed to the glass being half empty. Look, but it's kind of full over here because that didn't happen, but look at what cool thing happened because we went and did this thing. And just sort of consistent self-reflection and work is definitely the key, I think, to continued happiness for sure.
I think also if you look through the motivations of the narratives that are out there. I don't know why I feel compelled to share it with your permission. I don't ever do this. If there's a famous within the Jewish tradition, there's I guess you could say like a behind the scenes. Again, it's thousands of years old, but behind the scenes to a lot of biblical stories. And there's a famous interlude before Jacob meets Esau, the which is from a mystical perspective, a clashing of two empires. And what happens is basically that he's trying to carry his sheep across this river, and this random stranger shows up, which is the manifestation of the darkness, I guess you can call it, but looks like a person. And and this guy starts helping Jacob move the sheep across. And then Jacob at a certain point looks back and he realizes there's endless sheep, and realizes that the guy is like generating these sheep while he's doing it. And it's all big distraction so that Jacob can't get across the river. And as soon as he has that realization, Jacob starts fighting, he starts fighting the guy itself who's creating the distraction. And I think that, again, not to get so political, but to get a little bit political, once you start to realize that the crafters of the narratives are benefiting from the narrative being what it is, suddenly you can look at it and be like, wait a minute, what if it isn't so dire at all? And the people that are attached to that dire narrative and are affected by the narrative, and again, there's a great book called Letting Go by, it's on my shelf somewhere, but there's a great book called Letting Go, and he talks about that the emotions that come up, we want to justify why I might feel angry or sad, but then we start looking for justifications for our emotions, whereas the more effective way to deal with the emotional arousal is just to let the emotions pass, that the emotions are like clouds in the sky. And if you just, again, if you really feel sad and then you focus on your sadness, the sadness will dissipate. Same with anger, etc. So like again, I think that it's interesting because there's been so much stuff that's been put out to keep people miserable, and then people experience their misery and then they attach it to the world. But in fact, if they realize that all of this stuff out there is, again, I'm not minimizing, but it's like, it's a narrative, it's a story so that people can get rich off of your misfortune. I know that sounds kind of whatever it is, but we both listen to Andy Frisella, so I think it's okay. But the idea would be like recognizing like, I don't want to be miserable. And if I can choose happiness and I can realize that there is just as much of a narrative out there for happiness, and being happy allows me to tap into my resourcefulness. And when I'm feeling resourceful, then I can spot out opportunity. Like that's the big shift that hopefully people can start making more and more, because that is ultimately, again, sort of like we said, how do you fight this kind of like cataclysmic darkness out there that's seeming to be trying to like envelop the whole world?
Wow, I love that. And that's a really great practical application of how to navigate it, because like you said, if you're paying attention, you'll realize as soon as that catastrophe is over, oh, here's another one. Oh, wait, that's not getting traction. Wait, here's another one. Now I've been seeing stuff every day. Recession's coming, recession's coming. It's like, well, are we just trying to create that by, pounding it into people's head that it's coming? So we're, I don't know. And the more you feed that fear, the more it feeds your life and the more miserable you are. Yeah.
Let me tell you the craziest thing. I was on the phone. This is nuts. We, thank God our business has been developing. And so we've been looking at a house and the house was really like, this is a pretty wild house. And, for us, and I was on the phone and I was wondering, are we ready yet? Is whatever it might be. And I look at this guy and this guy looks super familiar, but he's really tall. And I in my mind, and I pass him like 3 times. This is 9 o'clock at night at Trader Joe's. And I go to this guy who's like 6'2", and I'm like, do people ever tell you look a lot like Robert Kiyosaki? He's like, yeah, it's me. I was like, what do you mean it's you? He's like, that's me. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, people think because I'm Japanese, I'm short, but I'm tall. I was like, what? Anyway, so I wind up like talking to Robert Kiyosaki, who's a billionaire, at Trader Joe's in Paradise Valley at 9 o'clock at night. He's buying 2 cans of salmon and water. I don't know why, and by himself. And one of the things that he said about recessions was that he says that, his goal and his whole approach and the whole rich dad approach. I'm like, dude, you saved my life. I'm like, do I buy a house right now? I was like, let me send you my video on that. But he said that ultimately the way that he's been successful was he says there's 3 sides of the coin. There's the head, the tail, and then the edge of the coin. And he says the way that he's been successful is he sits on the edge and watches which ways the coin is falling. So as soon as Biden got elected, he bought oil and he bought bullets. And he said, he's like, I've made millions of dollars off of that. And so it's like, yeah, recession's coming. And automatically, if you haven't done that mindset work on like what side do I want to be in the recession? Like I remember looking, again, this is always just a practical tip, that if you ever worry about something, figure out who's making money from that happening and then figure out if they're the one that's pushing the story. So I looked up, there's a guy named Jamie Dimon, who's at JP Morgan. And so I looked up, he was talking about, I saw Fox, I get anxiety on this. I was looking up, I see, head of JP Morgan says, the massive storm clouds are coming. So I said, who made the most money in 2008? And he was like number 3, right? So the thing is, it's like, it's a narrative. So you just want to think, why do you automatically assume you're going to be on the losing team? If there's going to be a huge fluctuation, why don't you realize, like, if you read where it's going, why don't you be on the winning team of that? If there's tons and tons of people that are going to be looking for jobs, I'm in the business of helping. I like the way I see what I'm building right now is I'm creating. My friend's getting, again, I'm not knocking anything and hopefully I don't get fired, right? Not that I get fired, but whatever, canceled. Like
Yeah.
my friend, our very close friend, is going and getting her PhD in marital family therapy. And they're about $120,000 in. She's about 4 years of work and supervision. And she's telling us like what she's actually studying. And I'm like, I don't know if any of this stuff is actually practical. And at the end goal, she could maybe make $250 an hour. Our coaches are billing out dramatically more, and they're doing that in a couple of weeks because we just teach you like how to do there. So I see myself as like a contrary to the narrative of college and the job market, and you're helping people be resourceful on their own, right? Again, someone like you could be coaching so many different people because of all the experience you have. And it's like, oh, Angie, do you have a PhD in CrossFit? You're like, no, bitch, I just know how to do it, right? Or it's like, oh, do you know, like, where's your MBA from? You're like, mother effer, like, look at the last 20 years of what I've built, right? Like, what is my education? Again, like, it's not. Like,
Or the streets back in the day, dude. That's
yeah,
where we all got our education. How do you think we're still here?
that's the point. And it's like, oh, I have this such and such addiction. You're like, yeah, and I had it worse than you, and I know what it's like, and all of that stuff, and being able to authentically articulate what you do. No effing Ivy League school is going to be able to compare. I would take someone like you any day over a PhD because you've actually done the shit, come over it, understand it, know where I'm coming from, right? So it's just interesting. Like, we look at this stuff and we think, I'm going to be in the losing end of what's happening. And it's like, no, just figure out where it's going. Again, if you're in addiction treatment, like, what's going to happen with the world? More and more people are going to need you. You're doing like fitness. More and more people are getting fat and they don't know how to have functional movement and they need what you're doing. So just like figure out, look at the world, and then go where people are going to need you the most. And again, that's that resourceful thinking. Don't be like, oh shit, recession. Be like, awesome, recession. That means people are going to need this, and this.
1,000%. It's one thing that we have at our age is experience and having lived through certain things in certain times. And I remember back in 2008 with the big crash, everybody was freaking out. My staff were freaking out. How are we going to survive? What are we going to do? And there was just so much fear and uncertainty. And I, as an adult, don't remember having lived through this. So I wasn't quite sure what to do. But I was at a point where I was like, I need to fight back and not agree with this. So I'm going to do the thing that would be the most irresponsible thing for me to do, to say, I am not agreeing with this. And I went out and bought like a very fast V8 gas guzzling car. It was like why do I did need a car, but I didn't have to go that route. Instead of buying a Prius, I went like, yes, I'm going all in on this thing that's going to cost me a ton of money because I'm not going to agree with the world right now that we're heading in this direction. And I'm going to say, this is how I disagree. And it was kind of empowering, and it might have seemed a little reckless and irresponsible, but what it did is it shifted our universe and our mentality to say, hey, we don't agree with what's happening out there, and here's how we're not agreeing with it. And we're going to help more people than ever because, like you said, guess what? Now there's more people than ever, like in the pandemic, that need our help. And so we stay in here, we do what we got to do. We find ways to creatively be able to help them finance and get through the program or get the right insurance and help more people than ever. And we had like our best years back in that time period in 2008, 9, and 10 because we were needed the most during that time, and we stayed brave and we kept moving forward.
I have a feeling. I mean, yeah, that's when it comes down, like what we're talking about with self-trust, and the ability to write your own narrative. Again, like a lot of us feel like we have to justify the decisions that we make, but the reality is, the way that I try to reframe it is develop. Again, this comes from two different sources. One is an awesome mindset coach out here in Scottsdale, and another is a guy named Dan Sullivan, who's one of the most famous executive coaches for like 500 years. And so he talks about this idea of a want journal or a want list, right? Where you accustom yourself to focusing on what you want, not what you need, and not what makes sense. Because ultimately, again, the things that we live for are those things that we want. And if we're always thinking about what do I need, we're always going to be holding ourselves in and not living the lives that we want. And so there's a lot of people out there. Again, I work with oftentimes a very religious crowd who really struggles with, I found, a lot of like, well, is this what do pious people need such a thing? And I'm thinking to myself, like, on the flip side, like if a pious person can have that and enjoy that and can show it that you can be both pious and you don't miss out on enjoying your life and enjoying the world, like that was was a melding thing for me. Because when I first got attracted to religion, we grew up like middle class. And then when my parents got divorced and there was some financial stuff that went sideways a little bit, we were really looking at, I was genuinely afraid of my mom being homeless. And I remember the feeling of how like awful that felt. And then I met some like more, I guess you could say, like observant people, more religious people, and I was shocked because I never met really wealthy people before. I never met wealthy people that had families like intact. I never met intact families before, and I never met intact families that were like spiritually connected. And so I'm sitting in this mansion with this dude that's surrounded by his wife and kids, and they're talking about ethical and spiritual concepts. I'm like, F this, where do I sign? I want this life. And then I ended up going to Jerusalem, and Jerusalem, it's a very different standard of living. And these are people that have been living a certain way for hundreds and in a lot of cases, thousands of years, and the priorities are completely different. And I found myself trying to meld into that. And then, again, that's where like all of this like poverty mentality and a lot of fear came in for me.
Yeah.
And I realized the thing that inspired me was seeing the guy that had the money. And so, because again, I'm not saying like develop a desire for something you don't have, but if you already have a desire, like ask yourself, how can I use that for the betterment of other people? So the fact that you might want a nice car, again, thank God I have a car that I love. And again, like it's over the top and who the F needs it. And it's like, I want it. And I love it. And like, that's what I want. And then when people can look at me and say, Jacob Rupp was, a rabbi, and Jacob Rupp was broke. And now Jacob Rupp's built a business where this is the kind of car he can drive. And it's not even, a very small percentage of, again, it's not like I blew all the money on the car, right? But it's like, I was able to build that. So that's inspiring for other people. So when I drive that car, I have what I want. And also I'm thinking about how does this inspire other people? And that's the same thing it sounds like with you. So it's that same reframe of like, what do you want? And really own it. And then ask yourself on the other side of that, like, how can I use this for the highest and best use of the people that are around me?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and for me, it makes me feel good. There is nothing I like more than a loud, fast car. Gosh, it just makes me feel good. And I know it's not the most responsible thing, especially these days. It's like repeat from 2008. Gas prices are soaring. Do the responsible thing. California's pushing everybody into electric cars because it's a responsible thing.
You're pushing everyone into electric cars, but then the grid is based on fossil fuels. So now you have to carry
right, and they're shutting them off all the time. Like I've experienced more power outages in the middle of summer, and we don't have AC back here, so it's not like we're taxing it with our AC or anything. And yes, so that's a whole new set of problems. But it makes me feel good, and I love that you say that, because I think that's what I know I've struggled with through so many years, because I'm in the business to help. I'm not in the industry to get rich. You shouldn't get rich off other people's misfortune. There's a lot of limiting beliefs. And although, there's validity to all that, because bad players in the field took what I'm doing in drug rehab and became billionaires by giving terrible service and maximizing, pharmaceutical. It's been a very bad field. But because of those bad players, I know I find myself putting limiting beliefs on myself as far as like how much I should make or validate or give myself due to not wanting to appear as if I'm a bad player in the field.
Well, I wonder, it's not, I think that getting rich off of others people's misfortune, I think it always comes back to that question of are you ethical? And if you're ethical and you're providing something of value, then again, the riches oftentimes, again, if you're an ethical person, there's a concept about that money is sort of a tool, right? So it's like, if you're an ethical person that's delivering good value, the more money you make, the more you'll be able to help others. And even if you're like, yeah, well, you took all of the money you made and you spent the last month at the Four Seasons, when you come back from the Four Seasons, you're going to be in such a place where you'll be able to be in the headspace to help so many more people. Again, that's that same thing that comes back, and could be it's because you're in California and people like to demonize everyone that's not the ultra wealthy that are actually running everything, right? But it's like, if you look at people that are ethical, that have created value and are creating products and services that actually help people and help again, like help a demographic that really needs it and is so susceptible to abuse by the system. Again, the people that make all of this money off of the homeless, so that that they keep them on the streets as opposed to actually rehabilitating them. It's like, the more that you can make for being ethical and then being able to reinvest it either in your business or business expansion or just yourself and mental expansion for you, it's like you should have all the money for that, because the more that you do it, the more good that you're going to be able to do.
And that is the thing. Yeah. In the right hands, you can just create even more opportunity and success and help for others. So it shouldn't be a bad thing. But, it's one of those things that we constantly, at least for myself, I need to constantly work at, is those limiting beliefs, because I know they can also affect, the amount of good that I can pull in for all of us because of those limiting beliefs. So it's definitely something that I'm working on all the time.
I just think for me, it's the biggest thing is to find, you have to have, um, there's a, I got really, I think probably after our time together, I got very into NLP.
Mm.
There's a guy named Richard Brandler that I love, and I think that everyone should, he passed away, but everyone should learn from him. And the whole idea of mental reprogramming. And one of the concepts that he talks about is that we just react. If we find ourselves reacting a certain way, it's because we don't have another way to go. So stimulus comes in, response goes out, and it just was all like one way straight across. And so the way to start to give yourself options is to start creating other, when the stimulus comes in, what do you want to tell yourself? So again, practically speaking, just hearing what you're saying, it's like, if you find yourself triggered by wealth and you want to be, again, like we talked about, abundant and being able to generate opportunity. So what's that? What are the stories that you put in your mind as soon as you hear that voice in your head saying, don't be rich, or we're going into a place of lack, or I shouldn't charge so much, or whatever it would be, and figure out what's the replacement story. And again, you said that you do this, like you're saying, like the fact that you do gratitude. And again, for your listeners that are paying attention, like if you want to be like Angie, you actually have to do the work. She's not saying, I know there's a practice called gratitude. She's like, I was journaling this morning. It's like, right.
Yes.
Well, why do you think you're able to do it? So I think that also that case is like, for me personally, who I had a lot of like anxiety and a lot of fear. And the way that I've been able to deal with that is, again, first of all, to recognize that it's my past traumas impacting like the present. There's nothing actually to worry about. We're actually okay. And also recognizing, what am I going to tell myself when I feel the lack? And so again, we talked about the beach before that we started recording. Like, I have images on my phone, every single, my lock screen, my home screen, it's all water. And it's all not to knock Minneapolis, but like, it's all like ocean, because the ocean for me symbolizes abundance. And so whenever I feel fear, I know how to trigger abundance for myself. And so that thing of just like figuring out whatever like thought doesn't serve you, and what is that image or place that you can go that can re-unlock like your ability to feel expansive, or however you want to feel.
Wow, I love that. And that is such an amazing hack, because so many things, I know there's been many things through the year of certain things that will irritate me. And I've really tried to like, certain slow drivers or something, and like replace that like as a trigger to think of something good and positive that I want in my life, so that we're replacing negative emotions and feelings that aren't serving us with positive things that will continue to put that picture out there, or that vision, or that purpose, so that we are always working towards that, and not getting stuck in the stuff that just annoys us and takes us nowhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Which is why, I think I really enjoy, doing the work. And I don't, do you have a hard stop? I forgot to
No,
ask you
you're
that.
good.
Oh, okay, good. So I think the other big thing that you and I both touched on that's important is doing the work. So, we can have all these amazing enlightenment, and a lot of people like want it and it sounds really good to them, but they're not willing to invest in the time in order to do that, whether because they have kids, and my kids, and then they're this and routine, and then it's right into work, and then it's dinner. It's like, well, get up an hour before the kids get up and put your time and energy into this. A lot of people like the idea, but they don't want to be inconvenienced with what it would entail in order to do the work.
I wonder if I wonder if I love the idea of what you said, investing, and it could be that, I'm again, like I said before, look where people make money, and I make money when people invest in their mindset. But I've also made a ton of money investing in my own mindset. And so one of the first things that I could say is a person shouldn't attempt to do it on their own. I literally have coaches and mentors for any area that I actually care about. And again, it's across the board. And even again, people might say, well, I can do it enough myself. And it's like, yeah. And what could you do if you had someone that knew what you needed to push you further? How much further could you go? And so I think that the first step would be for a lot of people is to find who's created an exceptional life. And again, you could do this for free. Again, there are so many podcasts and people that we know. And again, like scroll through my phone, like I put it together. I probably listened to about 15 plus hours of free self-development. But then just over the last like half of a year, I've dropped probably north of $75,000 into my own self-development in terms of my own mindset, my mindset coaches, people that I work with. And so the first step is like, where are you investing? Because usually the things you invest in, those things you actually care about. And so if you actually want something, invest in it. And invest in someone that can help you get there. The time investment is also really important. But I also think that there's a sense of, I guess you can say, again, this is a dynamic that you see a lot in partnerships. And again, not to, hopefully it's safe to say it around you, like when you deal with like male-female partnerships, although everyone can define however they want, right? Is you'll find that oftentimes there's literally a lack of ability to communicate. And so it's like, so person one wants to hear X and person Y doesn't know how to say X to the first person, right? So there's like this incredible like sense of, even though we're grown-ups, like it feels like just like, I don't know what success looks like and I kind of suck at this. And once you start to realize like, I don't know how to do this, and then you could just sort of ask, again, that's going back, there's this idea about attachment styles. There's these 3 types of attachment styles. So what does secure attachment look like? Like what we're all trying to shoot for, which is kind of hard, right? Is that you know what you want and you ask for it. And then the other person can hear what you're saying and give if they're able to. That's like how a healthy relationship works, right? So the idea would be that we have to develop, I guess, almost like a healthy attachment with ourselves, that if we're feeling bad because, well, I didn't meditate for 5 hours, I only could do it for 2, and I feel so like inept, just to actually set up like what would success look like. And again, this goes back to a Dan Sullivan concept of the gap and the gain, which is, he said that all entrepreneurs have this, and maybe even if you're not an entrepreneur, you might identify with this also, is like you're sitting in the present. If you're focusing on the past and what you've done, you're in the gain, you're going to feel good. Oh, I meditated 2 days today, meditated, even though, and again, you'd say, well, but you meditated longer yesterday, yeah, it's like, but today I meditated for 2 days, for 2 minutes, and that was hard. I could have meditated for 0. Or the gap, that's the gain. The gap is like, I'm thinking about what I could have done better. So I think the third piece on that would be to give yourself realistic expectations and just be happy, like you said at the beginning, and give yourself credit and thank yourself for what you were able to do.
I think that's so important because you got to remain fluid. And I go through this too. Here's my morning routine. I've got this very extensive, like now it's a good hour plus. And then on days where, like, say I stayed up late, maybe I tried to get a little more sleep and I'm beating myself up throughout the day. And it's like just giving yourself a little grace of, yeah, but okay, you weren't able to do those things, but look at the other things that you did either the day before or because of that or after, and appreciating those as part of the process. And it is what it is. It's that radical acceptance. It is what it is. We did the best we could do, and let's keep going forward, and not to give yourself an excuse, because I think if you do that often enough, then it starts to become habit to blow these things off, and then you're not really like holding yourself accountable for what is the greatest good for you. But it's also just to understand that things change, life change, things are coming at us unpredictable, and we've got to pivot and change, and sometimes that throws our nice little routine off, and we just got to be able to fluidly navigate that and then get back on track.
I love that. I would just add one piece that I actually heard last night. It's like a mystical concept, but there's this idea that the universe, God, whatever people want to call it, the universe expects us to mess up. We get really upset with the mess up. The universe like put that into the fabric of creation. But where there is, I guess you can call it like divine disappointment, is when we don't try and to return back to the place where we were, right? So the effort is that everyone gets upset on the mistake, but misses that the real opportunity is your ability to come back. And again, you know this because this is your life, but it's like, in terms of like when it comes to like diet and exercise, it's like, I'm going to not eat pizza, then I ate pizza, and then you beat the shit out of yourself for the next 3 days. And during the time you're beating yourself, you're like, well, I'll have some beer then, obviously, and I'll have some cake also because I feel so bad. And it's like, no, you ate pizza, and now let's return back to the plan. And if you have that approach, not just to food, not just to exercise, but really to everything. And it's like, how do I just catch it? Right. It was a great, I don't know if you can see behind me, I found this guy named Michael Connolly, who's like the greatest like crime writer ever. But he has this book called, what was the name of the, oh God. It was called The Following Sea. Was this, and he was just like this brilliant idea. So there was a boat in one of these books called The Following Sea, which is that the wave that you get knocked down by is not the one that you see, it's the one that comes after the one that you saw. And so it's like, and again, a lot of ocean mentality here. I also heard Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about how people are, you want to think about opportunity like an ocean, which is that there's always waves crashing. So even if you miss this one, just watch for that following sea. The next one's coming. That's your opportunity. So I think that same concept is, how fast can I get back on it, as opposed to being really upset on the places where I slipped, because that was inevitable.
Yeah, well, and that just 100% describes someone like overcoming addiction, right? If there's a mess up or if there's something that derails their progress, you don't throw out the whole thing and say, forget it. See, I can't do it. You're like, okay, what did I do wrong? Let me rectify that situation. I wasn't prepared for that, or I made a bad choice, or I just said, fuck it. Now I need to get myself back in order. And we keep moving forward, and just having the grit to do that without allowing yourself to go down the downward spiral because of ego or whatever else goes with that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying. So do you primarily work with couples now? Because I think that is something that's probably missing, because you'll see like one person doing a lot of work on themselves and maybe the other person not so much. And then they're at just such different places that I feel like that can create a lot of separation with certain couples as well, or people that are trying to work together.
The long and short answer is, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually launched one of the so again, we have two different verticals in our business. In our executive coaching business, usually primarily I'm working with the main entrepreneur. Like, again, maybe it's a partnership, maybe it's the executive and the team. But one of the things that I found, and again, I've had the opportunity to work in many circles that, again, of entrepreneurial based groups, is that there is a usually pretty, like as you suggested, usually a pretty repeatable dynamic of one of the spouses is like, hard charging, self-development, whatever it might be. And the only reason why they've been able to be successful in a lot of cases is because they have that opposite effect of someone that is not like that. It does usually kind of create the, I guess you could say, the grounding or the space or whatever it would be. And then the inevitable challenge usually is, and it's interesting because entrepreneurs are sort of like that, that they, again, I think that I found that there's a, how do I say it? That there's a sort of part of, again, like with ADD, like you're all over the place, but you can also super focus. So most people think like ADD is like, oh, they're always thinking. It's like, no, an ADD person will be able to hone in and not think about anything else and super focus when they find that thing. And I think a lot of reasons, again, and a lot of entrepreneurs have ADD, it's like they miss their tunnel vision. And so very often they'll be tunnel vision, they'll miss that the marriage is suffering, if that's sort of what you were suggesting. And so they might also think that the same principles that would apply to a successful business apply to a successful marriage. Do we have a plan? Do we know where we're going? Are we are we assessing where it is? Is everybody actually happy? Are people, trying to figure out how to get another job, or are they actually like dialed into the company mission, right? So I've definitely seen that is an ongoing theme. I actually have a client of mine who has done a lot of really amazing work in this area, and we were actually speaking about starting what it's called the Entrepreneurial Marriage Initiative, where again he's like, I wonder how many other entrepreneurs have these kinds of challenges. I was like, oh, just about everyone, right? So we're working on it and thinking about it, but you're right. It's very important that when you go on a journey, that, and I think this is the caveat, it's not, I'll say two things. There's a guy named John Schnarr, whatever it is, who has a book called Passionate Marriage. And in the book Passionate Marriage, overall, again, I'm sure he's wonderful. I thought the book was kind of boring, but he has this idea called the crucible, which is that the dynamics of a marriage does not change unless one of the people has made the decision, I'm changing no matter what. And then the options are either we change together and the marriage evolves, or the marriage ends. So there's this concept of the
So black
crucible.
and white.
Well, I mean, that's the point though, that when you
Yeah.
put your foot down and you're like, I'm changing. And again, like some people, it takes them 20 years to get there. Some people, it takes them 2 years or 2 months, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I think that on one hand, there's this idea of the crucible, but if you want to sort of avoid that, which again, like you said, it's you're kind of like betting the house with that, is that I think it's important that as a person, as a spouse engages, and I'm guilty of this, so I learned I learned this one by screwing it up, is first of all, to appreciate that you very likely attracted someone that's the exact opposite or very, very opposite of you, especially if you fell madly in love right away when you were young. Assume it probably wasn't love at first sight. Assume it was your two traumas coming together, and kind of identifying that, right? Once you see that, then you're like, what the hell's wrong with this person? It's like, no, what the hell's wrong with you that you guys got together, and you guys are going to naturally approach things differently, very likely. So being the entrepreneur that I am, guilty of all of the things that I accuse other people of doing, it's like I didn't make proper space for my wife, and I'm certainly not the model husband. But one of the things I've been working on very actively is twofold. If you are one of those like self-development psychopaths, right? Which is number one, creating space where they will be on their own journey. Again, my wife and I work together. I can't tell you at times when she wants to like leave this thing and try something else, it brings up abject panic, has nothing to do with her and all kinds of abandonment issues from childhood. And it's like you got to own your story. You have to create space for your partner. Again, this works for business partnerships also, for them to do their own thing. And I think also to consistently reassure them that you're not leaving them behind. Again, don't say, well, you better shape your shit up or else you're getting left behind, because that's exactly what the problem is. But to
Yeah.
be reassuring them that I'm not demanding that you change, and I'm not demanding that we change. I'm in the process of getting better and doing the best I can. And I will ride or die with you for as long as you'll have me.
I love that, but I think the key is both partners, I think, being willing to change for the better or for each other or something, because I think when someone's doing so much work on themselves, and again, we see this with people coming out of rehab and working on addiction and things, if they're doing all the work, which is good, they were the ones that ended up in rehab, but let's say their environment hasn't changed and the people around them haven't changed and they're trying to bring them up, ultimately it's going to pull them back down. And so there's got to be, I think, whether it's a marriage, a partnership, even a parent-kid situation, there's got to be mutual work done to a greater or lesser degree, so that you're both sort of on the same page, which I think is it's important to be successful.
No, I think that's, again, it's funny, in again, leaving any names aside, I get an opportunity to look at very dysfunctional companies also, and I see in the nonprofit world it's like rampant, of employers that like to keep their employees broke or just over broke so that they have no other options. And again, sort of the work that I've done, where I can go into a nonprofit environment and be like, hey, you're working a million hours and not making any money, and if we just add this system in, you could, blow up your business. I've seen the employers like, oh my God, if you train my people, I literally had someone said that if you, it was a multi national company, said, if you train my employees, I'll lose everybody. So I'm like, so you're saying if your employees actually have enough money and are empowered, you're going to lose your entire workforce? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, this is toxic. So the idea would be, right, I think the same thing with a marriage is, it's like you have to build a system where it maintains its integrity while keeping everybody's dignity intact. And again, like you do with your work, and you do with your company, and you do with your organization, it's like people want to work for you. And the only way you get people to want to work for you is if you put their needs, their priority, their best interest, like as at the top of your priority list. And that's how you create that very productive company.
Yeah, I love that. That's such good advice for anybody in any situation. Like we said, it could be applied to a marriage, a parent situation, a work situation, you name it. It's important to have that as an equal type situation for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think now I have to bounce. If I
Yeah.
apologize
All
to you.
good.
This
Yeah.
was so much fun.
I know. I know. Well, yeah, we will definitely maybe do hopefully a part two, and then
I would
maybe
love
one of
that.
these days you'll put me on your podcast,
I
which
would
I
love
would
that
love
as
to be
well.
on. And I thank you so much for spending your day with me. And for our listeners, if they love what they've heard or they just want to look more up about you or maybe look to you for some mentorship like I've had, how can they find you?
I spend a lot of time on social media, so hopefully it should be pretty simple. Instagram is the Rupp Group, Jacob at theruppgroup.co. Just look up Jacob Rupp on any social platform, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Hopefully you should find me. Otherwise, I haven't been doing my job very well. So I'm more than happy to help. And from the bottom of my heart, it's again, going back to that gratitude piece, when I think about the opportunities I've had to be parts of journeys of people like yourself and like Daniel and just what you're doing, it's really awe-inspiring. And I don't know how I got so fortunate to be able to do the kind of work that I do and to be in the role and to be trusted by people like yourself. I'm incredibly grateful. And I'd like to say unworthy, but what I want to reframe it as is I hope I can continually push forward and provide value and provide platforms to people to consistently find those creative sparks like this podcast that is doing so much good. So thank you so much for everything. I really mean it. It's really an honor and a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob.
You're the best.
You're the best. Thank you. What car did you get? Just curious. I think I saw a picture of it.
So you should know it's been ruined now. I knew I would ruin it. I've been driving a 2022 M4, which is awesome. But then I just drove a Porsche Turbo, and that thing is like the M4 is fast. It's got like 500 horsepower. It'll beat most cars on the road. I got in that Porsche. I was like, oh my God. So that's the we'll see what happens next. But
man, there's something the way those German cars drive. I had an old school 914 Porsche, but it just like you're so low to the ground, you just felt like you were part of it. It was amazing.
It is awesome. Yeah, no, I the M4 is such a fast car and it's so good that I drove a bunch of other Porsches because like that was my dad. I have this whole thing where like my dad had a Porsche and so it's kind of important for me to have one. But the other Porsches weren't as fast as the BMW, but then I drove that Turbo and it was supposed to be like a stretch thing where I was going to be like, oh, I'm going to experience abundance. Then I got out of the car, I'm like, fuck, okay, how do I afford it?
Yes, I love that.
What was your 2008 muscle car?
I mean, it was just an Infiniti M45, awesome. But it was a V8. And of course, gas prices were through the roof. And I'm like, I love it. I put on the gas. I hear it. We go fast. Like, it was super great. It was still very mid-range, but man, I love it.
You drive, yeah, for me, like the gas mileage is, because I drove like a lot of, like, I drove like Hondas. And so like, I would like drive to Scottsdale, which is like a 20-minute drive. And I'm like down a quarter tank. And I was like, yeah. And then like also like tires, like when do those go out? And I was like, no, this car's brand new. They're like, yeah, I need more tires. I'm like, what the fuck?
Wow. Yeah, because the tread's super thin, right? Because they make them sports. Yes.
You also drive like an asshole because you have a car like that, so you're always like spinning out the back. Yeah, yes, it is a very exciting habit. It's like in California, you're like, why am I paying so much money for this? And you're like, no, I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah. So. Yeah, well, exactly where I live, it's like, well, because I could go walk on the beach or the forest, depending on how I'm feeling today. It's like, okay, that's why we do this.
I'm so there's an ice cream place right off of where are you? You're elite. What's it called?
Santa Cruz.
Aptos. Oh, I thought it was a small town south of that. No, Santa Cruz proper.
Yeah. I mean, Aptos is like right next to it. I'm in Santa Cruz County. Yeah.
There's this place that one of my happy spaces for my abundance is the surfer. That surfer like walk, I forgot what it's called. And then there's an ice cream place right off of the freeway that is also a favorite spot. I love
Marianne's.
Verve, like the best. Do you drink that?
Oh, yeah, that's our town. You got it. Verve Coffee. Oh man, they have this espresso like shake. It's so good. So good.
I literally draw. Whenever I go, my friend and I will do like a man bonding trip from time to time. So we go to California. I'm like, I'm driving to Verve Coffee. He's like, we're like in Napa. He's like, you're an idiot. That's in Santa Cruz. I'm like, we're going to Verve. He's like, all right. Anyway,
well, next time you drive to Santa Cruz, you better fucking look me up, dude.
I will totally do that. Hell? Awesome. I'm very excited. It's good. I want to go back. I want to go back very soon. It's the best place. I love it.
Awesome.
Okay, tell me when this thing is live and I'll promote it on all my stuff, okay?
Will do. Thank you so much.
You are the greatest. It's so nice to talk to you. Thank you so much.
You too. Have a great one.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.